Sarah Martinez wiped the sweat from her forehead as she stepped out of the small grocery store in Cedar Ridge, Texas. The summer heat was unbearable, but it wasn't the weather that made her feel sick to her stomach. It was the conversation she'd just overheard inside the store. "Did you see that Martinez woman with that baby again?" whispered Mrs. Henderson to her friend. "That child doesn't look anything like her, or that husband of hers. Something fishy is going on there." Sarah clutched the baby carrier closer to her chest, where 3-month-old Emma slept peacefully. The little girl had become the center of her world, but also the source of her marriage's destruction. Emma had arrived at their doorstep 6 months ago under the most unusual circumstances, and Sarah had made the decision to adopt her without fully discussing it with her husband. Miguel Martinez was a proud man who worked the Johnson Ranch just outside town. He was known for his skill with horses and his strong sense of family honor. When Sarah brought home the abandoned baby, she thought he would understand. She thought he would see what she saw, a helpless child who needed love and protection. The baby had been left on their porch during a terrible thunderstorm. Sarah found her in a basket with nothing but a note that said, "Please take care of Emma. Her father will come for her when he can." There was no other information, no last name, no contact details, just a beautiful baby girl with striking green eyes and dark hair. Sarah had always wanted children, but after 5 years of marriage, it seemed like it might never happen naturally. When Emma arrived, it felt like a gift from heaven. She immediately fell in love with the tiny infant and couldn't imagine giving her up to strangers through the official adoption system. Miguel had a different reaction. He was suspicious about the circumstances and worried about the legal implications of keeping a child that wasn't officially theirs. More than that, he felt betrayed that Sarah had made such a major decision without really consulting him. The arguments started small, but grew bigger each day. "We don't know anything about this child's background," Miguel would say during their heated discussions. "What if the parents change their minds? What if there are medical issues we don't know about? We're not prepared for this, Sarah." Sarah would counter with emotional appeals about the baby's needs and their responsibility to help an innocent child. "Look at her, Miguel. She needs us. We can't just abandon her like whoever left her here did. We have love to give, and she deserves a chance at a good life." The tension in their small house became unbearable. Miguel started working longer hours at the ranch, coming home after Sarah and Emma were already asleep. Sarah spent her days caring for Emma while working part-time at the local diner. Trying to save money for the baby's needs, their neighbors and friends in Cedar Ridge began to notice the strain. The Martinez family had always been well respected in the community. Miguel's family had worked ranches in the area for 3 generations, and Sarah had grown up just 1 town over. People knew them as a solid, hard-working couple who attended church regularly and helped their neighbors. But now, whispers followed Sarah wherever she went. Some people admired her for taking in an abandoned child, while others questioned the wisdom and legality of the situation. The uncertainty about Emma's origins made some folks uncomfortable. Their discomfort added to the pressure on Sarah's marriage. Emma, oblivious to the controversy surrounding her, was a generally happy baby. She smiled early and seemed to respond particularly well to Sarah's voice and touch. Sarah documented every milestone in a journal she kept, hoping that someday Emma would want to know about her early months. The financial strain was real too. Baby supplies were expensive, and Sarah had to cut back her hours at the diner to care for Emma properly. Miguel's salary from the ranch was steady but modest, and they hadn't planned for the additional expenses of a child. Dr. Patricia Wilson, the town's only pediatrician, had examined Emma when Sarah first brought her in. The baby was healthy and showed no signs of neglect or abuse, which was reassuring. Dr. Wilson had gently suggested that Sarah contact Child Services to make the adoption official, but Sarah kept putting it off, afraid that bureaucracy might separate her from Emma. "These things need to be done properly," Dr. Wilson had advised, "for the baby's protection and yours. There are legal procedures in place for good reasons." Sarah knew the doctor was right, but something inside her resisted taking that step. She felt like Emma was meant to be with her, and she was terrified that involving officials might result in losing the child. she'd already bonded with so completely. Miguel's patience was wearing thin. He'd grown up in a family where decisions were made together, where husband and wife discussed major choices before acting. Sarah's unilateral decision to keep Emma felt like a betrayal of their partnership. "You didn't even ask me," he'd said during one particularly difficult argument. "You just decided for both of us that we were going to raise someone else's child. What if I'm not ready to be a father? What if I wanted us to have our own biological children first?" Sarah felt hurt by his words, interpreting them as rejection of Emma rather than frustration with the process. "Emma is an innocent baby who needs our help," she'd responded. "I thought you were the kind of man who would step up when someone needed help." The distance between them grew wider each week. They stopped talking about anything except necessary household matters. Miguel started spending evenings at the local bar with his ranch buddies, while Sarah devoted herself entirely to Emma's care. Their families tried to offer advice, but it only made things more complicated. Miguel's mother thought Sarah should have consulted him first, while Sarah's sister believed Miguel should be more supportive of Sarah's maternal instincts. As Emma approached her 4th month with them, the situation reached a breaking point that would change all their lives forever. The breaking point came on a scorching Tuesday evening in July. Miguel returned home from the ranch covered in dust and exhausted from a long day of moving cattle. The Johnson Ranch had been struggling with drought conditions, and the work was harder than usual. All Miguel wanted was a quiet dinner with his wife and some peace. Instead, he walked into chaos. Emma was crying inconsolably, and Sarah was pacing the small living room, bouncing the baby and looking frazzled. The house was a mess, bottles and baby clothes scattered everywhere. Dirty dishes piled in the sink, and the television blaring a soap opera that Sarah had been watching while trying to calm Emma. "What's wrong with her?" Miguel asked, setting down his hat and trying to keep the irritation out of his voice. "I don't know," Sarah replied, tears of frustration in her eyes. "She's been crying for 2 hours straight. I've fed her, changed her, tried everything. Maybe she's getting sick." Miguel watched his wife struggling with the screaming infant and felt a mixture of sympathy and resentment. This wasn't the life he'd imagined when he married Sarah. He'd pictured quiet evenings together, maybe starting their own family when they were financially ready, building their relationship before adding the enormous responsibility of children. "Have you called Dr. Wilson?" he asked, raising his voice over Emma's cries. "She said it might just be colic, and to try to keep her calm," Sarah answered. "But nothing's working." Miguel loosened his shirt and tried to think. The baby's cries seemed to echo through his skull, amplifying every doubt he'd been having about their situation. He looked around at their small home, which had once been their peaceful sanctuary, now transformed into something unrecognizable. "Sarah, we need to talk about this situation," he said finally. "This isn't working." "What do you mean?" Sarah asked, though the defensive tone in her voice suggested she knew exactly what he meant. "I mean all of this," Miguel gestured around the room. "We're exhausted, we're broke, we're fighting constantly, and we're caring for a child that isn't even legally ours. What happens when the real parents show up? What happens if Child Services finds out we never went through proper channels?" Sarah's face hardened. "Emma is our daughter now. I don't care about paperwork or legal channels. She needs us. She needs her real parents," Miguel shot back. "We need our lives back." The words hung in the air between them like a physical barrier. Sarah stared at her husband, as if seeing a stranger. Emma continued crying, but both adults were now focused entirely on each other. "I can't believe you just said that," Sarah whispered. "This baby has been part of our family for months. I love her like she's my own flesh and blood." "But she's not," Miguel replied, his voice growing harder. "That's the problem, Sarah. You've convinced yourself that we're her parents, but we're not. We're just two people who found a baby on our doorstep, and instead of doing the responsible thing, you decided to play house." Sarah felt like she'd been slapped. "Play house? Is that what you think I'm doing?" "I'm caring for a child who was abandoned. I'm giving her love and stability." "You're living in a fantasy," Miguel said, his frustration finally boiling over. "You want a baby so badly that you're willing to ignore reality? What about what I want? What about our marriage?" What about our future? What about Emma's future? Sarah countered. She's an innocent child who needs protection. Miguel ran his hands through his hair, a gesture Sarah had once found endearing, but now saw as dismissive. The baby's cries seemed to be getting louder, and the summer heat was making the small house feel suffocating. I've made up my mind, Miguel said quietly. Either you contact Child Services tomorrow and start the process of turning her over to proper authorities, or you'll have to choose between her and me. Sarah felt her world tilting. You can't be serious. I've never been more serious about anything in my life, Miguel replied. I married you, Sarah Martinez. I didn't sign up to raise some stranger's child under these circumstances. I want our life back. This is our life now, Sarah said, holding Emma closer. Emma is part of our family. No, she's not, Miguel said firmly. And if you can't see that, then maybe we don't have a marriage worth saving. The ultimatum hung between them like a poisonous cloud. Sarah looked down at Emma, who had finally started to quiet down, perhaps exhausted from crying. The baby's green eyes looked up at Sarah with complete trust and dependence. I won't give her up, Sarah said softly, but with absolute certainty. I can't abandon her. Miguel nodded slowly, as if he'd expected this answer but hoped he was wrong. Then I guess you've made your choice. I guess I have, Sarah replied. Though her voice was shaking, Miguel walked to their bedroom and began pulling clothes from their shared dresser. The sound of hangers clinking and drawers slamming filled the house. Sarah sat on the couch holding Emma and watching her marriage dissolve before her eyes. When Miguel emerged 20 minutes later with a packed duffel bag, he paused at the front door. For a moment, Sarah thought he might change his mind, might come back and hold both her and Emma, might find a way to make their family work. I'll be staying at my brother's place, he said without looking at her. When you come to your senses about this situation, call me. But I won't live like this anymore. The door closed behind him with a finality that echoed through Sarah's heart. Emma began crying again, as if she could sense the emotional turmoil around her. Sarah held the baby close and let her own tears fall freely. Outside, Miguel sat in his pickup truck for several minutes before starting the engine. Could hear Emma's cries through the thin walls of their house, and for a moment, he almost went back inside. But his pride and his certainty that he was right kept him moving forward as he drove toward his brother's ranch. Miguel told himself he was doing the right thing. Sarah would realize that keeping Emma wasn't practical or legal, and she would make the responsible choice, and they could rebuild their marriage and start their family properly. But deep down, Miguel had a terrible feeling that he'd just made the biggest mistake of his life. 3 weeks passed after Miguel left, and Sarah's life settled into a difficult but manageable routine. She worked morning shifts at the diner while Mrs. Rodriguez, an elderly neighbor, watched Emma for a small fee. The arrangement wasn't ideal, but it was the best Sarah could manage on her own. The financial pressure was enormous. Without Miguel's ranch salary, Sarah struggled to pay rent, buy groceries, and cover Emma's needs. She'd sold some of their furniture and applied for assistance programs, swallowing her pride for Emma's sake. The people of Cedar Ridge had mixed reactions to Miguel's departure. Some sympathized with Sarah, seeing her as a devoted mother who'd been abandoned during a difficult time. Others sided with Miguel, believing he'd been reasonable to expect his wife to consult him about such a major decision. That poor woman Sarah would overhear at the diner, trying to raise that baby all alone. Just as often she'd catch different whispers. Miguel Martinez is a good man. She should have listened to him about that baby situation. Dr. Wilson had called twice, gently urging Sarah to make Emma's adoption official through proper legal channels. It's not just about paperwork, the doctor explained during one visit. It's about protecting Emma's rights and your rights as her guardian. What if there's a medical emergency and you can't make decisions for her? Sarah knew the doctor was right, but she was terrified of involving authorities who might decide Emma would be better off with a different family. Her maternal bond with Emma had grown stronger every day. The thought of losing her was unbearable. Emma was thriving despite the chaos around her. She'd started sleeping through the night, her colic had improved, and she was beginning to show her personality. She smiled when Sarah sang to her, and seemed to recognize Sarah's voice from across the room. These small victories gave Sarah strength during her darkest moments. Miguel, meanwhile, was staying at his brother Carlos's ranch about 15 miles outside town. Carlos was younger and unmarried, living in a small house on the property where he managed cattle for an absentee owner. He'd welcomed Miguel, but made it clear he thought his older brother was making a mistake. "She's your wife, Miguel," Carlos said one evening, as they shared beers on the porch. "Whatever problems you have, you work them out together. You don't just leave." "You don't understand," Miguel replied. "She made a decision that affects our whole lives without even talking to me. How can I trust someone who does that?" "Maybe she was scared you'd say no," Carlos suggested. "Maybe she knew that baby needed help and didn't want to risk losing the chance to help her." Miguel had thought about that possibility many times over the past weeks. He remembered Sarah's face when she'd found Emma on their doorstep, the immediate love and protective instinct that had transformed her expression, but his hurt and pride kept him from reaching out to her. At the Johnson Ranch, Miguel's absence had been noticed. Ranch work was demanding, and personal problems couldn't interfere with caring for livestock and maintaining the property. But Mr. Johnson, who'd employed Miguel for 8 years, pulled him aside one day. "Your distracted son," the older man said, "I don't know what's going on at home, but it's affecting your work. Maybe you need to take some time off and sort things out." Miguel was embarrassed that his personal life was impacting his professional reputation. The Johnson Ranch was one of the most respected operations in the county, and Miguel took pride in his work there. "I'm sorry, Mr. Johnson," Miguel said. "I'll do better." "It's not about doing better," Johnson replied. "It's about being where your heart is. Right now, your heart seems to be somewhere else entirely." That conversation haunted Miguel for days. He'd always been a man who believed in facing problems head-on, but he felt stuck in an impossible situation. Going back to Sarah felt like accepting defeat and validating her decision to ignore his concerns. Staying away felt like abandoning his marriage and responsibilities. Sarah, meanwhile, was discovering reserves of strength she didn't know she possessed. Caring for Emma alone was exhausting, but it also gave her a sense of purpose and accomplishment she'd never experienced when Emma smiled at her or reached for her face with tiny fingers. Sarah felt like she was exactly where she was supposed to be. The diner job provided some adult interaction and a small but steady income. Betty, the owner, had been understanding about Sarah's situation and allowed her to bring Emma on slow days when Mrs. Rodriguez wasn't available. "That baby's brought some sunshine into this old place," Betty would say, watching customers smile at Emma's presence, but the stress was taking its toll on Sarah's health. She'd lost weight, had trouble sleeping, even when Emma was quiet, and found herself crying at unexpected moments. The isolation was particularly difficult. She'd lost not just her husband, also the social connections that came with being part of a married couple. One afternoon, while Emma napped in her carrier beside the diner counter, Sarah overheard a conversation that made her blood run cold. "I heard someone's been asking questions about that Martinez baby," said Tom Fletcher, a local rancher who came in regularly for coffee. "What kind of questions?" asked his companion, Jerry Walsh. "Legal questions about abandoned children and adoption procedures. Word is, someone might be coming forward about that baby's background." Sarah's hands shook as she poured their coffee. She tried to appear casual while listening for more information, but the men changed the subject to cattle prices and weather patterns. That evening, Sarah couldn't stop thinking about what she'd overheard. Who was asking questions about Emma? Were the baby's birth parents having second thoughts about abandoning her? Was someone from Child Services finally investigating the situation? She looked down at Emma, who was playing with a soft rattle while lying on a blanket on the living room floor. The baby had become the center of Sarah's universe, and the thought of losing her was terrifying. For the first time since Miguel left, Sarah seriously considered calling him. Maybe they could work together to protect Emma if someone was trying to take her away. Maybe their shared love for this child, because surely Miguel had grown attached to Emma during their months together, could bridge the gap between them. But Sarah's pride was strong too. She couldn't bring herself to make that call. Miguel had abandoned them when they needed him most. Why should she reach out to him now, just because she was scared? As night fell over Cedar Ridge, Sarah held Emma close and tried to push away her fears. Tomorrow would bring whatever it brought, and she would face it as she'd faced everything else since Miguel left, with determination and love for the child, who'd changed her life forever. She had no idea that tomorrow would indeed bring answers, but not the kind she was expecting. The next morning started like any other. Sarah woke at dawn, fed Emma, prepared for her shift at the diner. Mrs. Rodriguez arrived at 7:30 to watch the baby. Sarah kissed Emma goodbye before walking the 6 blocks to work. Betty's diner was already busy with the breakfast crowd, ranchers, construction workers, and early commuters, grabbing coffee and eggs before starting their day. Sarah tied her apron and began taking orders, trying to push aside her worries about the conversation she'd overheard yesterday around 10 o'clock. During the lull between breakfast and lunch, Sarah noticed a man she didn't recognize sitting at the corner booth. He was tall and lean, wearing clean jeans, boots, and a pressed shirt, not the typical ranch hand attire, but not city clothes either. Most striking were his green eyes, an unusual shade that seemed familiar somehow. The man had ordered just coffee, and had been sitting quietly for over an hour, occasionally checking his phone, but mostly just watching the activity in the diner. Something about his presence made Sarah uneasy, though she couldn't pinpoint why. "More coffee?"
Yes.
she asked, approaching his table with the pot. "Thank you," he said, and his voice was soft but carried a slight accent. Not local Texas, but something from further west. "I'm actually hoping you might help me with something." Sarah's heart began to race, though she tried to keep her expression neutral. "What can I help you with?" The man reached into his shirt pocket and pulled out a small photograph. Sarah's blood turned to ice as she recognized Emma's face, though the baby in the photo looked slightly younger than Emma did now. "I'm looking for my daughter," the man said quietly. "Her name is Emma, and I believe she might be living in this town." Sarah's hands shook so badly she nearly dropped the coffee pot. She set it down on the table and gripped the back of a chair for support. This was the moment she'd both feared and wondered about for months. "I'm sorry," she managed to say. "I don't know what you're talking about." The man's green eyes, Emma's eyes, Sarah realized, studied her face with obvious recognition. "Sarah Martinez, aren't you? You found Emma on your doorstep several months ago." There was no point in denying it. Sarah's reaction had already given her away. She looked around the diner, grateful that only a few customers remained and none were paying attention to their conversation. "Who are you?" she whispered. "My name is Jake Sullivan," the man replied. "I'm Emma's father." Sarah felt dizzy. She'd imagined this moment countless times, but now that it was happening, she was completely unprepared. Why now? Why didn't you come for her before? Jake's expression was pained. "Can we talk somewhere private?" "Can we talk somewhere private? And you deserve to know the truth about Emma's situation." Sarah looked at the clock. Her shift didn't end for 2 hours. But Betty was in the kitchen and might let her leave early for something this important. Her mind raced with questions and fears. Was Jake here to take Emma away? Did he have legal rights she couldn't fight? Is this the end of her life as Emma's mother? "Betty," she called toward the kitchen. "I need to take an early lunch break. Family emergency." Betty appeared, took one look at Sarah's pale face, and nodded. "Go ahead, honey. Take your time." Sarah untied her apron with trembling hands. "There's a small park 2 blocks from here," she told Jake. "We can talk there." The walk to Riverside Park was the longest 2 blocks of Sarah's life. Jake walked beside her in silence, occasionally glancing at her with what seemed like sympathy. The park was nearly empty, except for an elderly man feeding ducks at the pond. They sat on a bench under a large oak tree, and Jake took a deep breath before beginning his story. "Emma's mother was my wife, Rebecca," he said. "She died in a car accident when Emma was 6 weeks old." Sarah gasped. She'd imagined many scenarios about Emma's origins, but never that the baby was an orphan. "I was deployed overseas with the military when it happened," Jake continued. "Army Rangers. I was in Afghanistan when I got the news about Rebecca's death. They gave me emergency leave, but by the time I got back to Colorado, Emma had already been placed with Rebecca's sister temporarily." "Why didn't you take her then?" Sarah asked. Jake's face darkened. "Rebecca's family never liked me. They thought I wasn't good enough for her, and when she died, they blamed me for being overseas, instead of home protecting her. Rebecca's sister, Linda, convinced a family court judge that I was an unfit parent because of my military deployment schedule. Sarah listened in shock as Jake explained how he'd fought the custody decision but lost due to his military obligations and the family's influence with local courts. I was supposed to ship out again for another 6-month deployment, Jake said. The judge ruled that Emma needed stability, not a father who would be gone most of the time. Linda was awarded temporary custody, but Emma ended up on our doorstep. Not with Linda, Sarah pointed out. Jake nodded grimly. Linda and her husband decided they didn't want to raise Rebecca's child after all. Instead of contacting me, they drove Emma to Texas and abandoned her. They chose your house randomly, saw the toys in your yard from previous neighbors, and figured you might take her in. Sarah felt sick. They just left her. Their own family? Rebecca's family wanted to erase me from Emma's life completely, Jake explained. They thought if Emma disappeared into the system somewhere far away, I'd never be able to find her. They left that note to make it look like the birth parents might come back, hoping to discourage anyone from contacting authorities. Immediately. How did you find her? Sarah asked. I've been searching for months. I finished my deployment. I discovered what Linda had done, hired a private investigator, contacted police departments across 3 states, and finally got a lead when someone reported seeing Linda's car in Cedar Ridge around the time Emma went missing. Sarah's mind reeled with this information. Do you have proof of all this? Jake pulled out his phone and showed her several documents, Emma's birth certificate listing him as the father, photos of him with Rebecca during her pregnancy, military, records proving his deployment timeline, and court documents from the custody battle. I have DNA test results too, he said quietly. I was able to get a sample from items Linda had in Colorado. Emma is definitely my daughter. Sarah stared at the evidence, her heart breaking. Everything Jake was saying made sense and explained the mysterious circumstances of Emma's arrival, but it also meant that her time with Emma was ending. What do you want? She asked, though she already knew the answer. I want my daughter back, Jake said simply. She's all I have left of Rebecca, and I've been searching for her every day since she disappeared. Sarah began to cry, not the quiet tears she'd shed when Miguel left, but deep, wrenching sobs. She's my daughter too now. I love her. Scared. For her all these months. Jake moved closer on the bench, his voice gentle. I can see that you love her. The private investigator told me how you've been raising her alone, how you've sacrificed everything for her. I'm grateful to you, Sarah. You saved Emma's life and gave her love when she had no one else. But you're going to take her away, Sarah said through her tears. Jake was quiet for a long moment, watching ducks glide across the pond. When he spoke, his words surprised her. I want to do what's best for Emma, and from what I've learned about you these past few days, you're part of what's best for her. Sarah looked up at him, confused. What do you mean? Maybe we need to talk about what Emma really needs, Jake said. She needs her father, but she also needs the woman who's been her mother for the past several months. Maybe there's a way we can both be part of her life. Sarah stared at Jake in disbelief. What are you saying exactly? Jake leaned forward, his green eyes serious but kind. I'm saying that Emma has bonded with you as her mother. Taking her away from the only stable home she's known would traumatize her. But I'm also her biological father, and I have rights and responsibilities toward her. So what's your proposal? Sarah asked, wiping her eyes with the back of her hand. I want to stay in Cedar Ridge, Jake said. I want to be part of Emma's daily life, but I also want you to continue being her mother. We could work out a legal arrangement, maybe joint custody. Or I could adopt you as Emma's legal guardian while I establish my parental rights. Sarah's mind raced. This wasn't what she'd expected at all. You'd give up your military career to stay here? I already have, Jake replied. I finished my last deployment and didn't re-enlist. I've been planning to transition to civilian life anyway, and now I have the best reason in the world to do it. Sarah felt a flicker of hope, but practical concerns immediately surfaced. Where would you live? What kind of work would you do? Cedar Ridge isn't exactly full of opportunities. I grew up on a ranch in Montana, Jake explained. No cattle, horses, and ranch management. I've already talked to a few local ranchers about work possibilities. As for living arrangements, I was thinking we might need to discuss that. Sarah raised an eyebrow. Discuss what exactly? Jake held up his hands. I'm not proposing anything inappropriate. But Emma needs consistency and stability. Having her father and mother figure living in separate places and shuttling her back and forth isn't ideal for a baby. You're suggesting we live together? Sarah asked, incredulous. We're complete strangers. For Emma's sake, Jake clarified, separate bedrooms, clear boundaries, focused entirely on what's best for her, at least until we figure out a better long-term solution. Sarah stood up and paced a few steps away from the bench. The proposal was overwhelming and completely unexpected. Part of her was relieved that she might not lose Emma entirely, but another part was terrified of inviting a stranger into her life and home. There's something else you should know, she said, turning back to face Jake. My husband left me because of Emma. He gave me an ultimatum, give her up or lose our marriage. I chose Emma. Jake's expression softened. I'm sorry. That must have been incredibly difficult. It was, Sarah admitted, but I don't regret it. Emma needed someone to love her unconditionally, and I couldn't abandon her. That tells me everything I need to know about your character, Jake said. Emma's lucky to have you as her mother. Sarah sat back down, her mind spinning with possibilities and concerns. Even if we worked out some kind of arrangement, what about the legal issues? You said Linda, and her husband abandoned Emma illegally. Won't there be consequences for that? My lawyer is handling that situation, Jake replied. Linda could face charges for child abandonment, but my priority is securing Emma's welfare, not revenge. If we can establish a stable home for Emma with both of us involved, the courts will be more interested in her future than punishing people for past mistakes. Sarah thought about Miguel and wondered what he would think of this development. Would he see Jake's arrival as vindication of his concerns about keeping Emma? Or would he be willing to reconsider his position if it meant Sarah could keep Emma? Legally and permanently? I need to see Emma, Jake said quietly. I haven't seen my daughter in months, and I need to know she's healthy and happy. Sarah's protective instincts flared. You can't just walk into her life and expect her to recognize you. She's been through enough disruption. I understand that, Jake said patiently. I'm not expecting miracles. I just want to see her, maybe hold her if she'll let me. I want to start building a relationship with my daughter. Sarah checked her watch. Her lunch break was nearly over, but this conversation was far from finished. I need to get back to work, but maybe you could come by the house this evening. Mel will be there with Mrs. Rodriguez, the neighbor who watches her. I'd like that very much, Jake said. What time works for you? I get off at 6. Come by around 7. That will give me time to prepare Mrs. Rodriguez for your visit. Sarah paused. And Jake, don't expect too much too fast. Ma doesn't know you, and I won't have her upset or confused. I completely understand, Jake assured her. I'll follow your lead on everything regarding Emma. As they walked back toward the diner, Sarah's mind was full of questions. How would Emma react to Jake? Could this arrangement really work? What would happen if Miguel decided he wanted to come home? And most importantly, what was truly best for Emma? There's one more thing, Jake said as they reached the diner's front door. I want you to know that I'm not here to disrupt Emma's life or take her away from someone who loves her. I'm here because I want to be the father she deserves. And I can see that you're already the mother she needs. Sarah felt tears welling up again, but this time they weren't entirely sad. Why are you being so reasonable about this? Most men would just demand their child back and fight for full custody. Jake smiled sadly. So I know what it's like to lose someone you love. Lost Rebecca, and I almost lost Emma forever. I don't want Emma to lose you too. She's already lost enough in her short life. As Sarah returned to work, she found it almost impossible to concentrate on taking orders and serving customers. Her entire world had shifted in the span of one conversation. Emma had a father who loved her and wanted to be part of her life. He seemed willing to include Sarah in that life rather than excluding her. But Sarah also knew that complicated situations rarely had simple solutions. Tonight's meeting would be crucial in determining whether Jake's reasonable words would translate into a workable reality. The afternoon dragged by slowly. Sarah kept glancing at the clock, watching the minutes tick toward 6 o'clock. Her nervousness grew with each passing hour. She was about to introduce Emma to her biological father, and she had no idea how any of them would handle the emotional complexity of the situation. Betty noticed Sarah's distraction during the final hour of her shift. "You've been somewhere else all afternoon, honey? Everything all right with Emma?" Sarah realized she'd been so focused on Jake's revelation that she hadn't considered how to explain the situation to the people in her life. "It's complicated, Betty. Emma's father showed up today." Betty's eyes widened. "The father? After all this time? He's been searching for her?" Sarah explained briefly. "Her mother died, and there were custody issues. It's a long story." "Does this mean for you?" Betty asked with genuine concern. "I don't know yet," Sarah admitted. "We're going to talk tonight and try to figure out what's best for Emma." Betty squeezed Sarah's shoulder. "You're a good mother to that baby. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise." The words meant more to Sarah than Betty could know. In the midst of all the uncertainty and emotional turmoil, it was reassuring to hear someone acknowledge that she had been a good mother to Emma, regardless of the circumstances that brought them together. When 6 o'clock finally arrived, Sarah finished her shift and walked home with her heart pounding. Every step toward her house felt monumental, as if she were walking toward a future she couldn't yet imagine, but hoped would include both Emma and some measure of peace. Over the next hour, Jake and Sarah talked while Emma played on her blanket between them. Jake shared stories about Rebecca, how they'd met at a county fair in Colorado, their quick courtship and marriage before his deployment, Rebecca's excitement about becoming a mother. She would have loved watching Emma grow up, Jake said wistfully. She had so many plans for teaching her to ride horses and helping with school projects. Sarah found herself warming to Jake's gentle manner and obvious love for both Rebecca and Emma. "What kind of work are you hoping to find here?" she asked. "I talked to several ranch owners yesterday," Jake replied. "The Johnson Ranch might have an opening for an experienced hand. The owner, Mr. Johnson, seemed interested when I mentioned my background." Sarah's heart skipped. "The Johnson Ranch. It's where my husband works." Jake looked surprised. "Your husband? I thought you said he left." "He did, but he still works there. We're separated, I guess, staying with his brother on another." Ranch Sarah felt awkward discussing her marital problems with Jake. "I'm sorry," Jake said. "I didn't mean to pry. This whole situation must be incredibly complicated for you." "It is," Sarah admitted. "Miguel gave me an ultimatum about Emma, and I chose her. Now you're here, and I don't know what any of this means for my marriage." Jake was quiet for a moment, watching Emma chew contentedly on her teddy bear's ear. "Have you talked to him since I arrived in town?" "No, we haven't spoken since he left 3 weeks ago." Sarah realized how sad that sounded. "I keep thinking he'll come to his senses and come home, but he's stubborn." "Stubborn, maybe this changes things," Jake suggested. "Now that Emma's legal status can be resolved, maybe your husband would reconsider." Sarah had been thinking the same thing, but she was afraid to get her hopes up. "Miguel felt like I betrayed him by making the decision to keep Emma without really consulting him. I'm not sure he'll forgive that, even if the legal issues get sorted out." Emma began to get cranky, signaling that bedtime was approaching. Sarah stood up and gathered the baby's things. "I should put her down for the night. She gets fussy when her routine is disrupted." "Of course," Jake said, standing as well. "Thank you for letting me meet her. This means more to me than you can imagine." As Sarah prepared to carry Emma to the bedroom, Jake hesitated by the door. "Sarah, I meant what I said earlier about wanting to work together for Emma's sake. But I also want you to know that I won't pressure you into any arrangement you're not comfortable with." Sarah appreciated his sensitivity. "Where are you staying tonight?" "There's a small motel on the highway. I got a room there while I figure out more permanent housing." Sarah made a decision that surprised even her. "You could sleep on the couch tonight if you want. Emma sometimes wakes up during the night, and it might be good for her to get used to having you around gradually." Jake's face showed his gratitude. "Are you sure? I don't want to impose." "You're not imposing. You're her father." The words felt strange but right coming from Sarah's mouth. As Sarah put Emma to bed, she could hear Jake moving around quietly in the living room. When she returned, she found him looking at the family photos on her mantle, pictures of her and Miguel on their wedding day, vacation photos, images of their life before Emma. "He looks like a good man," Jake said, nodding toward a photo of Miguel on horseback. "He is," Sarah replied. "That's what makes this whole situation so painful. We both want what's best, but we disagree about what that means." Jake sat back down on the couch. "Maybe I should talk to him. Man to man. Explain the situation and see if we can work something out." Sarah felt a flutter of anxiety. "I don't know how he'd react to that. He might see you as validation of all his concerns about Emma, or he might see me as the solution to those concerns," Jake countered. "If I can take legal responsibility for Emma while you maintain your role as her mother, it removes the uncertainty that worried him." They talked until nearly midnight, working through the practical and emotional complexities of their situation. Jake proved to be thoughtful and reasonable, always bringing the conversation back to what would be best for Emma. Around 2 in the morning, Emma's cries woke both adults. Sarah got up to check on her, but Jake was already standing in the hallway. "Is she okay?" he whispered. "She's hungry," Sarah replied softly. "She usually needs a bottle during the night." "Can I help?" Jake asked. "I'd like to learn her routine." Sarah showed Jake how to prepare Emma's bottle while she changed the baby's diaper. They worked together quietly in the dim kitchen light, and Sarah was struck by how natural it felt to share these parental duties with someone who clearly cared about Emma's well-being. Jake fed Emma while Sarah watched from the doorway. The baby took her bottle eagerly and seemed content in her father's arms. When Emma finished eating, Jake burped her expertly and rocked her gently until she fell back asleep. "You're a natural," Sarah whispered as Jake laid Emma back in her crib. I had some practice with my younger siblings growing up," Jake replied. "But this feels different. This is my daughter." The next morning brought unexpected drama. Sarah woke to the sound of a truck pulling into their driveway. She looked out the bedroom window and saw Miguel's familiar pickup truck. Her heart started. Racing Jake was already awake on the couch, alerted by the sound of the engine. "Is that your husband?" he asked quietly. "Yes," Sarah replied, quickly pulling on a robe. "He must have heard about you being in town." Miguel's knock on the door was sharp and impatient. Sarah took a deep breath and opened it, with Jake standing visible behind her in the living room. "Sarah," Miguel said, his voice tight with controlled emotion. "I need to talk." "Miguel, this is Jake Sullivan," Sarah said, trying to keep her voice steady. "Emma's father." Miguel looked between Sarah and Jake, his jaw clenched. "So it's true. The real father showed up." "Why don't you come in?" Jake suggested calmly. "Think we should all discuss this situation like adults?" Miguel stepped inside but remained standing near the door, his posture defensive. "I heard someone was asking questions about Emma around town. Then Carlos saw you talking to a stranger at the diner yesterday." Sarah realized that news traveled fast in a small town like Cedar Ridge. Jake has been searching for Emma since she was taken from him illegally. "He's her biological father, Miguel. He has proof." Miguel's expression was hard to read. "It's what happens now. He takes the baby, and you go back to our old life." "It's more complicated than that," Jake interjected. "Sarah has been Emma's mother for months. Taking Emma away from her wouldn't be in anyone's best interest, especially Emma's." Miguel looked surprised by Jake's response. "What are you suggesting?" "I'm suggesting that we find a way for Emma to have both her father and the woman who's been caring for her," Jake explained. "Sarah loves Emma, and Emma needs that love and stability." Miguel was quiet for a long moment, studying both Jake and Sarah. When he finally spoke, his words surprised everyone in the room. "Maybe," he said slowly, "it's time for me to come home and be part of figuring this out." Sarah felt her knees go, weak with relief and hope. Emma's soft cry from the bedroom reminded them all of what truly mattered, the well-being of an innocent child, who needed all the love and stability the adults in her life could provide. As the three adults looked at each other, each dealing with their own complex emotions, Emma's cries grew more insistent. Sarah smiled through her tears. "I think someone wants breakfast," she said. "I think it's time we all learned how to be a family, whatever that looks like for us." For the first time in months, Sarah felt like Emma's future and her own might include all the love and security a child deserved. It wouldn't be traditional, and it wouldn't be simple, but it would be built on the foundation of people who truly cared about doing what was right for Emma. The cowboy had come home. Not just Jake to his daughter, but Miguel to his family, and all of them to a new understanding of what family could mean when love and commitment guided their choices.